ask you some questions.
Yes, yes.
And what we're wondering is, what is your intention with this intensive retreat? I should say,
Yeah.
you have been having this for
Yeah.
12 years and
We've been
developed it, and yeah.
for 12 years in California, and when I think back, Richard and I have had a tremendous passion to find out for ourselves as Kay challenges us. So
Find out what for us?
to find out what is the possibility of really a change of consciousness or this kind of transformation. And we traveled to India, we taught in India for a year, and when we came back, this was still very much, the inquiry was very alive. And then we were invited to come to Ojai. It was sort of a dialogue we've been having with Mark Lee in Ojai. And this program sort of evolved, I think, because our passion, Richard had some ideas about how to develop the program. And then as it started to happen, people were just so interested. And we discovered that because of that people kept coming each year, and it's developed. And I think, for me, the sort of wonderful thing about holding the space, people feeling comfortable in that space to open up, to really go into the questions, to really look and go deeply in this feeling of affection and trust as the circle begins to have its own energy, and it keeps going like that. So you don't know, how people will respond or where it will go for them, but I think it's the possibility in the circle of discovering that you really can begin to pick up this listening and seeing and get a feeling for this, that it really is potent, it's really a potential that we can all work with. And I think that's been the wonderful thing that just keeps opening up for us as we do it each year.
What is it that we go deeply into, in a sense, in a retreat like this?
Yes. It's the idea that we can open up this listening and seeing that Kay has discussed and told us that there's a possibility we can look at this me consciousness as its own kind of operating system, and we can begin to see these patterns and begin to have a sense that we don't have to be controlled by this. And Richard, did you have any more sense of that?
Well, yes. Most people that have some glimpse or inkling that there's more to life than their everyday life. Mm-hmm. If they work in an office 9 to 5, or at least in America it's 9 to 5, or they go through the routine of their lives, it's something very mechanical. Mm-hmm. And once you become an adult, life they lose its perfume, its flavor, mm-hmm. and people begin to feel dull, and problems begin to loom, and what happens when that happens? Most people run to experts, to the psychologist or the psychiatrist, or the person that helps them to feel good, or they take some sort of program or guru that gives them a map, and says, well, here's a method. You must pray like this, you must meditate like this, you must have this mantra, you must sit quietly in the corner and think of nothing and all this. And people try that, but they hit a wall at some point, because everything is sort of transient when it comes to these things, these maps, these programs. They'll work for a little while, 5 minutes maybe, or 10 minutes, and they're left thinking, well, I'm back where I was, So Krishnamurti, someone for whom the me consciousness, this self-centered consciousness, which always seems to be self-referential, it's always falling back into itself, folding back into itself. It can never seem to get out of itself. So when this thing happened to him, when he awoke from this, or was liberated from this sort of a continuous loop back into oneself and one's problems and all that business, he realized that through inquiry, which is what we do, through this dialogical process, asking questions, the mind comes alert, it becomes alive. And the question requires it's a challenge. It requires you to meet that challenge in some way. And so we begin to share this probing, this inquiry, this investigation, you could say. And you begin to realize you really can probe into something. You can, things begin to open up and unravel, so to speak. And we sort of shine a light on and try to expose the whole undercarriage, you could say, the whole foundation in which consciousness, which is, Kay would say, Krishnamurti, that is thought and its structures, this whole thing begins to be seen as not what we think it is. Normally we think it's our only way that we can perceive, it's the navigating tool in our life, and but it's also the thing that creates a dilemma for us, a problem for us, and makes life seem limited, sort of shuts it down a little bit. So we probe into that, and things emerge out of that, insights emerge out of that, and it could potentially change someone's life in a very radical way.
And you mentioned dialogue. That is what we call it, and we sit in a circle and we dialogue. And how is that different from having a debate or a discussion? I mean, what is the quality of a dialogue?
Well, in a dialogue, for Deborah and I, the dialogue or inquiry, let's call it an inquiry. It's a living thing. It has a life of its own. It's organic. And it has its own energy and its own ebb and flow, its own unfolding, its own flowering. But, and there are people who have tried this dialogue business, and sometimes it gets bogged down because, you know, the various personalities and personal issues come up and this and that and the other thing. So, but in the work that Deborah and I do, and also the committee of Denmark, Krishnamurti Committee of Denmark, our emphasis is in sharing insights together and asking questions, because when you ask a question, the door opens. When you come to a conclusion, the door shuts down again. And I was a college teacher for many years, 20 years back in the United States, and most education, the teacher says, I know, and the students don't know. So it's this dumbing down, this sort of closing down. It's rote learning, you know, of endless memorization and all the spitting back information. So you could say that what we're doing is a kind of education in the sense that something new could come out of it. But it's really it's the aliveness of the sharing of insights around questions that creates a kind of an unfolding which is very different, radically different than anything that you'll find in any educational situation. Because I've been through them all actually, and most of them shut things down, and you come away feeling, you know, you may know a few things, you know, but nothing intrinsically changes in one's life.
So we're interested in experiencing it ourselves, finding out for ourselves, and not have anybody tell us what it is. That's
And therefore, no authority. Deborah and I aren't authorities. And in fact, even though we're called facilitators, we're really part of the exploration. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. It has to be fresh. It has to be totally something new, and we're grappling with it just like everybody else. And, so it's not a script. It's not a prescription. It's not, you know, all that.
It's not a curriculum.
No.
And I think what's exciting about it is that it is an exploration in a way that normally you're not doing in your daily life. Even in conversations with people, you're not really like looking at belief, how that impacts on your life, how it creates an authority, and how one is then unconsciously directed into certain things, doing certain things. So it's really a marvelous opportunity to explore, to stay with something, to also get all the different views or perspectives from all the different voices, and it becomes like it's like one voice in a
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who's speaking because all of it is informative, all of it is sharing and opening up the question
Yeah.
in a marvelous way that I haven't seen it possible in any other way.
I'm glad you said that, though, because I think perhaps that you really hit it on the head, which is it's an opportunity. It creates an opportunity to hold a space where people could feel, with affection
Yeah.
and sensitivity, people could feel relaxed
Yes.
and can open up and can they know they're not going to be judged.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to criticize them. They're not going to be. It's not like somebody knows something more than somebody
Yeah.
else and therefore uses that as a kind of a club to beat somebody up with, or to some elitist thing or something. It's a space that's alive where you can begin to explore, and it's supportive. So it supports someone, and they can feel comfortable opening up,
Yeah.
expressing themselves.
Are there any requirements to be in a dialogue like this, be in an intensive like this? I mean, do you have to know something? Do you have to read a lot of Krishnamurti? Can you?
I don't think that really there is a requirement. I think there would be a kind of an interest, a passion, this sense of longing that we all have about trying to become whole or to connect, these kinds of things. That something like that has to be happening.
Yeah.
And for different people in different ways that will happen.
Yeah.
Some people will come and they have been looking at K for 25, 30 or more years.
30,000 years.
30,000 years. For other people, maybe a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. But I think that the commonality in that is that interest to look, to explore, to discover something is definitely there.
And the openness to keep asking questions and not try to conclude or
And sometimes people who come for the first time to this kind of an intensive and may not have done dialogue, it may take a little time to get used to realizing that it isn't about finding the answers, about coming to conclusion. That you begin to realize the energy is in that sort of dangling of the question and you keep going into it.
Yeah.
But people quickly respond to that because they begin to feel more relaxed, comfortable, to realize that it's something that is open, that's not about sort of gaining the knowledge and this kind of thing. So
I'm glad you mentioned that too, Deborah.
Yeah.
In most so-called learning situations, you're accumulating, adding to. And the idea is that I may not know something now, I may not understand it, or I may not be able to resolve it, but in time, I'll keep adding, accumulating, and I'll learn. But in the work that we're doing, it's really about taking away. It's unlearning instead of learning. So, and unlearning, it means unburdening oneself.
Yes.
It's getting rid of all that baggage that we're all dragging from one day to the next in our lives.
So is there one insight that will change someone's life?
well,
One.
there are many, and then it's kind of also almost the perspective, the way that one might receive something that can be quite different. But I have found that the idea of listening and seeing, the way that Kay talks about it, which is an impersonal listening and seeing, is one begins to realize that there is this other level that one can actually listen to all this that is not personal. That sudden realization that you come to that it really is, it's a consciousness that we all share, that it's not individualized, that really Kay is pointing to, and that there is no particular me or center here. And that starts to vibrate on a certain level. So between understanding that and realizing that listening and seeing can be very much more expansive, that begins to, I think, penetrate and get more easy to kind of have a sense of it. That's what's been, kind of resonated and sort of allows the opening, this sort of possibility of going deeper. It's been very interesting to see that happening in the group and to also experience it, see what this is, the potential in that. It's very powerful.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think because this, when one begins this journey, it's a journey really. It's one faces the complexity of the whole business, the whole complexity of the mind, of consciousness. Psychologists say, well, there's the unconscious and the conscious, and Carl Jung talked about the archetypes and this and this. It seems like there's this very complex structures that are operating. So maybe it's the realization that the lens that we normally look through, which is consciousness, you could say thought and its structures. I mean, that's one way of describing it. That this consciousness is limited. And it seems like we don't seem to be able to navigate through life without it. We say, well, without thought, with these structures, which must be learned and must be, accumulated, and all this business we mentioned a moment ago, I'm lost. But it may be that this consciousness thing, seeing that is limited in some way, may give one a deep insight that there's something beyond, or there's another dimension to living than just the usual knowledge-based life that we all depend on. After all, knowledge has gained tremendous authority in our life, tremendous authority. And we seem to be under the weight of it all the time. We seem to be burdened by this business. And to realize that maybe knowledge is not the answer. So then what is? You see, that's one can begin to explore then. Once one sees the limitation of all of this, begin to explore something we don't know. And normally, there's no opportunity to do that. Because,
How do you speak of something you don't know?
How do you? And yet it's potent, because then you could begin to kind of tentatively probe into something. Like walking into a room where there's no light at all, and it's dark, but you walk into the room, you begin to probe a little bit, see what's there.
Yeah. So are people changing as a result of Kay's teachings?
Well, we will get emails from participants at different times, and they say that aspects of their life have really changed. So I think it does. It changes, and it's been many people that we've heard from who have corresponded with us over the years. Sometimes there's just that funny one where a young man who had been in a program, one of the first few years that we did this, and 3 or 4 years later, he writes an email and he says, "I got it."
That's it. Never heard from him again.
I got it.
That was it. And that it was like, wow, because you can't tell. I mean, as I thought of him at that, you wouldn't know that. And then also, I think the fact that it continues, when you have the opportunity to really immerse, I think, deeply for this amount of time, we just were 4 full days, and 6 days total, that something really gets sort of shook up. And you don't know how that will eventually, sort of work itself out. So that was really exciting. And I think that's been very exciting to realize that. We've had people come back also to the program many times, and they feel that that's valuable as well, to go through that immersion, to go deeply into it. So I would say yes, absolutely, that it's changing for people. Their lives are changing. Their whole perspective is changing. Their sense of being alive and feeling more unburdened is definitely happening.
Yeah, because it seems like you can read books, you can watch the videos, but there's something, there's a quality to meeting up and having dialogues. That there is another energetical aspect to it, in a sense, because I can sit at home and read a book and actually feel very excited about what I read, and but there's a dialogue, then something else comes out. I have a different kind of experience with that.
Yes, because you could read Krishnamurti. It's marvelous to do that. His insights are very deep, very profound. perhaps life-changing. See a video, which is also tremendous because his energy is vaulting. It's marvelous. It has a wonderful precision that's almost a sense of poetry the way he speaks and all that. Very thrilling in some ways. But it's the aliveness of actually entering into a dialogue, an inquiry with other people, like-minded people who are just as interested to probe and dig and explore as you are. It's something electric in that, and you begin to gather enormous energy and also release energy, because energy is bound up in something we don't normally think about, this energy thing. But energy is bound up in belief, it's bound up in conflict, in forming conclusions about things, resistance to life, resistance to the job, resistance to relationships, endless kinds of resistances that keep coming up. And energy gets bound up in that. So one thing that the dialogue can do, inquiry can do, if it's done with this in mind, is it releases that energy that we carry around, this kind of contracted energy, which shuts us down and gets the muscles all tight and makes us feel like sometimes life isn't worth living. We just don't have that marvelous sense of being connected to the whole of life.
Yeah.
It's this sort of narrowing down, sort of funneling down. So I would say one thing that happens in our intensive, but the intensive, is conflict on every level can be looked at. One can see that, see how it arises, both psychologically, inwardly, and outwardly, and by seeing that, seeing how conflict is constantly draining our energy, one can begin to release that. Not that you're releasing it, but seeing it begins to subside, and because it's there to see. So before it may have been kept hidden or hiding in the shadows of the psyche and all that business and one's conditioning. Now it gets exposed somewhat through the questions and through sharing and all that, and it begins to subside. And that can create a change. One can suddenly have this feeling that life doesn't pose the same problems that it did before. One's sort of moving a little more gracefully through one's life.
You use the word fluidly or fluidity.
Fluidity.
Yeah.
Very much so. Yeah. That's the other thing, is that our minds, we're so fragmented, or as Peter, who's in the committee, was saying the other day, the structures have created these boxes, these rooms, and we live from one room to the next room, from one structure to the next room. To be able to, for that to begin to kind of melt away, so to speak, drop away. And then there's this fluidity, this potential for fluidity. And then life has this sense of like a river that just flows. It has this flowy thing rather than chop, chopping itself up into all these little things.
So it's freedom. In essence, it's freedom to just experience life as it is.
As it is.
Yeah.
Which is something our consciousness has lost.
Yeah.
We've lost the sense of mystery and the sense that life is really rather fantastic. I mean, it's a creation. It's a flowering creation, and we've reduced it to a kind of my job.
Yeah.
My relationship, my problems, my conflicts, my this, my that. I mean, that's how we live our lives.
Yeah. I'm
not belittling it, but that's not life.
I think a lot of people have the sense, is that all there is?
Yes.
Is that all there is?
Yeah.
So to be able to participate in life as a living mystery, Krishnamurti used to use the word unknown. This is the unknown. But we've named everything. We say, the grass, the chair, this, that. And so we live in words. Words become a field that we live in, and we never really make contact with the grass or the tree or somebody else in relationship.
Yeah. another human being.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
or the animal.
Yeah.
I had an experience in Ojai once. It was very profound. I was walking with Deborah, and her family was visiting from up northern California, and I looked like very much like that situation that's there. And there in the clearing was a coyote, and because Ojai has lots of wild animals, bears and coyotes, and rattlesnakes and mountain lions and all this stuff. And the coyote looked at me, and the look devastated, absolutely devastated. And and my whole inner psychic life totally was revealed, like totally revealed. My whole life was revealed in that look. It was the most profound look I've ever received from any human or any animal, and I was devastated by it. And then I went to look to Deborah for a quick moment, and I looked back, it was gone. Just that look, though, actually changed my life. It's like I thought, my God, is this what I am? You know? So to have a relationship with an animal, with a tree, with this is a profound experience.
Yeah.
If one can get past all this business of me and my problem, all that.
Yeah. Wow. So on that note,
Yes.
we'd like to invite anybody to join.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad to get up. And Peter, would you like?